Welcome back, Rosebuds. We are now on our third part with Russ Cirincione. He's running for Congress in New Jersey 6 against Frank Pallone. We just had a conversation around universal basic income, and before that on handling crises such as the coronavirus. We're now on to our final part where we get to talk about why we have all these problems in our country in the first place. And that is out of whack prioritization due to corruption. Russ, when we talk corruption in your mind, what are the biggest problems that we're seeing that are causing this out of whack prioritization?
Well, um, corruption is honestly, whew, it is. We have a pay-to-play system in our federal government. We have a system where billionaires and multinational corporations fund our representatives' election campaigns, and therefore they're buying undue influence with our politicians. And honestly, the big money is the problem. The big campaign finance funding is the main problem. I fundamentally believe that if you want to reform a system that is based on corruption, you cannot take the corrupting money.
Mm.
That's why our campaign is 100% grassroots, all funded by people and by myself. And we have to end the pay-to-play politics in our nation. We have to kick out the lawyers, the lobbyists, and we have to close the loopholes. So we have to end lobbying because lobbying should not exist. We have to end this massive corporate socialism that we're seeing on a national scale, and it starts with completely banning the private donations to any federal representative. What this really is about is creating a duty of loyalty for our representatives to the people of their district, not to their donors, right? And I'll bring it back. I love the Democracy Dollars plan by Andrew Yang. Then they also did it in Washington. It's a great plan where everyone gets $100 in vouchers, and they can donate to any local or federal candidate that they like. And it puts everybody on the same playing field, and it also acknowledges that it does take money to run a campaign. So we have to really reform our system. We have to end Citizens United, kick the lobbyists out, ban private donations to federal candidates, and we also need to stop our representatives. We have to close the revolving door where representatives become lobbyists, right after they leave office. So there's so many things we have to do, and honestly, we have to really expand our administrative law. Congressional reps should not be able to own stock at all. They should not be able to have any
Love that
financial
idea.
interests that directly conflict with their position. Because, like as we've seen, the senators that knew about the coronavirus a month in advance sold off all of their stocks because they knew a stock crash was coming. So that whole scenario, while it's illegal, it should never have occurred in the first place. They should have been required to divest from the very get-go. Honestly, there's so many things we have to do. Give me an idea you want to go with.
That's a very true statement there. And I love the idea of kind of almost expanding the emoluments clause into a congressional framework. So I've always thought that it would be a great idea if we could have a blind trust that you could still invest into the market, but it's a blind trust that all congressional people have to invest into. And you could potentially have them invest in, more sustainable practices, but Congress isn't going to be influencing that specifically. But I'm curious to your first point of getting the money out aspect, because I completely agree with you. We have to put money into people's hands so they can participate. How do we actually get the money out? Because something like ending Citizens United is going to take a constitutional amendment, and we know, frankly, that's going to be a near impossibility, at least in a short term. What can we do to truly get these private donations out, in your opinion?
So there's an American Anti-Corruption Act that I support. It's by this group, Represent Us, and we can tackle this issue without a constitutional amendment because, look, honestly, first off, the Supreme Court decision by Citizens United was completely incorrect. Money is not speech. So what we do is we can define legislatively specifically that money is not speech. And look, the First Amendment does not come into play here at all. And the Supreme Court got it wrong. And as we've seen, Republican lawmakers have no problem enacting laws that are unconstitutional and then waiting until it's challenged in the courts. We can do it really quickly with legislative approval, with legislative bills. We can do everything to ban private donations. I mean, at the very least, what we could do is on state by state issues, we could have our states pass bills that adjust corporate laws. So if you think, every single corporation is incorporated in a state, and they are bound by two things: the laws of the state and their own bylaws. So we could have our states specifically change their own corporate laws, saying that no corporation shall participate in political activity. That would do it. That would do it almost immediately. Then we already have the $2,800 limit on individual contributions. Honestly, I mean, to be honest, we could change that as well. We could make every contribution, no matter from what source, capped at 2,800. We can make any. We also need to reform this super PAC nonsense. Super PACs are insanely undemocratic.
Yeah.
This is about getting our elections back to clean and fair elections. Americans deserve a strong, vibrant democracy with clean and fair elections. And we have to get the money out and get the people in.
Yeah, no, I strongly agree with your tactical approach of potentially having it be a state venture, or just, putting the legislation on the table and saying, come at us. We're going to deal with that. But one of the things I'd be curious for that more latter approach is, how do you get the people that are already within these bodies to get on board? That's how they've kept themselves in power, is they've been using these channels to fund their campaigns. How do you imagine going and trying to rally that support for that cause in the legislation?
Well, we rally around the values, like what I just said before. This is about returning our democracy back to people, and having clean and fair elections where the people's will matters the most. And we make the case based on those values approach. And like I said, like the anti-corruption provisions are massively popular with Americans today. If honestly, go up to any single person that you see in the street and say, "Hey, I'm John. Hey, do you think that your government works for you?" Or, "Hey, do you think that our government is bought?" Or, "Hey, do you think that money in politics is a bad thing?" 99.9% of people will say that our government has been hijacked by billionaires and multinational corporations. I'm telling you, this is a wildly popular thing with people. And if we make that case and we can pit any incumbent that is not willing to fight for democracy and the people, well, I mean, let's see what's going to happen with their election. So, I mean, I'm honestly not afraid to challenge anyone who will take corporate money and regulate and refuse to protect the people from corporations. I'm not afraid of it. I'm just so sick and tired of this campaign finance system that's just bribery, pay to play, corruption. Call it what it is. It's corruption. And any representative that takes money from a corporation and then refuses to support legislation that will regulate that corporation, forget about it. Get out of office. You're not doing your job. We need people that are going to do the job well and do the job for Americans.
I'm really glad that you have that approach of you're not afraid to challenge your your colleagues in this case, not just privately but publicly. That you're willing to actually say, "Hey, people, this person has not backed this proposal. You should be aware of that specifically and get them to do that or get them out." Because hopefully, although you introed on the corruption that you want the lawyers out, hopefully we could kick you in so that we can actually get that done. But the last thing I wanted to cover on corruption before we can help people figure out how they can help you is, what do you think we need to be doing in terms of voting reforms? Because there's multiple aspects to democracy reform in general. There's the money aspect, and then there's the actual way we vote people in. What do you think we need to do that's different from today in terms of our voting reforms?
Honestly, John, we could talk about this for like hours. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'll keep it quick though. First off, we need an independent federal agency that oversees every single election in every single state, because we're seeing right now in this primary, we're seeing polling places closed. We're seeing people disenfranchised before our very eyes. We're seeing hours and hours of wait lines just to cast a vote and express the one bit of power that we have every year in an election. We need to have independent federal oversights of our elections, of our state elections. We need to have funding federally provided to our states for elections. We have to have paper ballots that are verifiable on the internet to see that our vote was properly counted and properly made. We have to have really fast and efficient machines that do this as well, that are uncorruptible. We need federal production of these machines. We need to stop using third-party vendors for these machines because they're compromised in many aspects. We're compromisable. We have this wonderful invention. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's pen and paper. It's really good at counting votes, at counting votes and being verifiable. We have to reform the core of our democracy of voting. We have to make Election Day a national holiday. We have to make Election Day 2 days over the weekend. We have to. There are a million things that we need to do, and honestly, I am just so surprised that in 2020 we're seeing these problems occur right before our very eyes. It's so disheartening. It's like, so honestly, it shakes me to my core that these things have not been fixed for too long, and no, no one in power has ever conceded anything without a demand, without a massive demand of a movement. I mean, and in New Jersey, that movement is forming around our issue, the ballot lines. I'm sure you've heard about the ballot line issue, where candidates are basically put on in an Excel spreadsheet, pretty much, and there's like 5 columns: A, B, C, D, E, and anyone who's running that's not part of the establishment will be put down here in the corner, so that when somebody goes in the voting booth, most people do is they go into the
down
voting
the
booth.
line.
Yep, there's one button that they could pick at the top. It selects everybody down the line, and they chink it, and their votes counted like that. There's so much really voter suppression in our nation that we have to address, and I think that really fundamentally the problems are there are so many problems with our government that, like all of our grassroots organizing, we have so many things to address that we can't address them all at the same time. I honestly think that we should just unite all of our progressive movements on one issue at a time. So, like, let's say the month of April, every single person, every single group will organize around one issue of getting money out of politics. One issue until that is done, until that is fixed. Then we move on to the next issue, one by one by one, because our movements are really fragmented based on different issues that are important to us. But we have to coalesce around common causes. And I think voting rights is a main one that we should start with too.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you. My personal top priority is democracy reform because I really think that is the lever to be able to unlock all these other policies. Because at the end of the day, we've said this consistently throughout all of our parts. It's a prioritization problem, and it's who we have in there and who they are accountable to. And so if we can't trust who we have in there to do the job that's needed, we're not going to get anything solved. So I'm really glad to hear that. One quick clarification on voting, just so I know my audience cares about this issue, so I want to make sure that we get it out there. Do you support something like ranked choice voting or approval voting or score voting? What type of voting
Yeah,
system do you prefer compared to like our plurality system?
yeah, ranked choice voting is great, a great idea. I love it. It gives you multiple options, right? If your first vote's not count, I mean, even in this primary, like people who voted for Andrew Yang before he dropped out, and then after, like, and the election occurred after he dropped out, right? So people who voted early, their votes weren't heard, their choices weren't heard. Ranked choice voting would have helped those people would have got their second vote counted or the third vote counted. That's a great reform. I love it. We have to abolish the electoral college because it's an outdated system meant to squash populist movements. And it's about time that we stop these outdated old systems that just don't work. And every single Republican president has been elected because of the electoral college. because they've really, it's undermining the will of the people. So
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I do think some of these are going to be a little bit tougher. Hopefully, if we do coalesce, we can get these things that a lot of the times do require like a constitutional amendment because a lot of the power of voting systems are controlled by the states compared to the federal government currently. And the Electoral College is also something baked into our Constitution. So I really do think you're right that it does any of these reforms we want take a people powered movement. And with that being said, how can we help build a little bit more of a people powered movement for you in these times? How can the people watching today be able to support you in your efforts?
yeah, so my website's Russ for Us 2020. You can go on there and sign up to volunteer on our forum, and we're focusing on text banking and phone banking right now. And if anybody could chip in a couple of bucks, of course that helps too, because we have to pay our staffers,
Yeah.
we have to pay for advertisements, and it gets honestly really expensive. I mean, so far we've had about 950 contributions for $25,000, and we need to raise a little bit more than that to get us through this next to the election and into Congress. So I'm just so thankful for people who are involved in politics and for media outlets, for people like you that do interviews that are very concerned about the issues, and so thanks, John. I appreciate you being here. It's honestly it's sometimes it's hard to do. It's hard to do in the modern world to stand up for your values and what you believe in, but you're doing it. So thanks.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, Russ. And I really do hope that our whole audience here can actually come out and support you. I know in these times it's really important that we get those people in because I personally am frustrated beyond belief of what's happening in Congress right now. Because you're right,
Yeah.
the states have been putting it into their hands, and I'm very thankful that they have been doing that. But we need some people to frickin' lead in Congress. And I love this strategic approach that you're taking to that. So I hope everyone can help support you out because even if you may have disagreed on a couple of the issues today, I think that's you're never going to be perfectly aligned with anyone. And I really love the approach and your care for the people. So I know I'll be a supporter for you. And if you ever want to come back on, I'd love to be able to chat more. Because as you said, we
Yeah.
could go hours on democracy reform. It's my top subject too. So I'd love to pick
Yeah.
your brain a little bit more on that. But with that being said, Rosebuds, I just want to remind you all again of what we have going on our channel after you go and support out Russ. Come out and check our open source policy platform so that you can be able to add your own ideas to it. It started off as my own policy platform that started as 8 pages, and it's been built out to now 26 pages in total. So I'm really thankful for all the
Wow.
contributions you've all made. We had done our first poll of policy on that, as we've been doing on Twitter, and we said the For the People Act, a democracy reform itself, is something that we all agreed should be passed. So I was very thankful for that. Furthermore, you'll see down below the cheat sheet, which just has all of our content on the channel. So if you want to know what we're doing, just check that out. You'll find something. And finally, comment down below of what you thought about today's episode, as well as what other congressional candidates you'd like to see come on. We've made a slight change in the program, going more towards focusing on these congressional races than just every single individual, because we're going to be doing a little bit more individual content, and we love talking to the people who are actually stepping up and running for issues. With that being said, Rosebuds, I hope you have a great week. We're going to have a great week of programming. We're going to be also having on David Kim. We just had on Mike. He was a great candidate in Kentucky. We are going to be having so many more congressional candidates in the week to come. So I'm really thankful for that. And Russ, thank you so much for coming on again.
My pleasure, John. Thank you for having me. And yeah, support the Hill of Roses, please, because we need these issues being, in the minds of more people. So,
Well, I appreciate that very much. Rosebuds, I hope you have a great week, and I hope you all stay rosy.